I used to think the worst thing my father ever did was walk out on my mother when I was in high school. I was wrong. The day of the family party started with sunshine and polite laughter. My daughter Grace was wearing a little yellow dress with white trim, a gift from Aunt Deborah, who loved to sew. Grace had just turned 1 last month. She was toddling now, grabbing onto furniture, pointing at dogs, babbling about the moon. She was my whole world. We arrived a little late, as always. Dad's house hadn't changed since the divorce. He had rebuilt his life with Susan, a woman who always smiled too hard and called me sweetheart, like it was an insult. They had remodeled the kitchen and painted the living room, but the air still smelled like my childhood, a blend of coffee, carpet cleaner, and something sour underneath. My father barely looked at me when we came in. "You're late," he said flatly. His eyes drifted to Grace. "So that's her, huh?" I held Grace a little closer. "You could have done better," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. My stomach turned. I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on my cousins, the little buffet of food, the balloon arch my stepmother insisted on, but Dad kept circling, watching. At one point, while I was in the kitchen getting a drink, I heard Grace crying. I rushed out to find Dad holding her, clumsily, like she was something fragile and foreign. "She's fine," he barked when I reached for her. "She just needs to toughen up, like her mom never did." I froze. "Don't do this," I said quietly. He turned to the crowd and shouted, "She disgraced this family first, and now she expects applause for dragging another mistake into our lives." Gasps. Laughter from one drunk uncle. Someone dropped a plate. And then, in one horrifying instant, he pretended to trip. Or maybe he didn't pretend. But Grace slipped from his arms. She hit the floor with a sound I'll never forget. I don't remember screaming. People told me I did. But all I remember is the sound, that sickening, wet thud. And then silence. Time froze. I rushed forward, scooping Grace off the floor before anyone else moved. Her face was red from crying, her little arms flailing, her mouth wide open, but the sound hadn't come yet. Then it did. A piercing, breathless wail that rattled through my bones. "Get out of my way!" I barked at my father, who stood there motionless, arms still awkwardly in the air like he was balancing invisible blame. Susan rushed forward, her voice high-pitched. "It was an accident, sweetheart. He tripped—" "Don't!" I snapped. I checked Grace's head, her arms, her tiny legs. Her sobs were sharp, but she was moving, breathing, no blood. But I wasn't a doctor, and I wasn't taking chances. "I'm going to the ER," I said, already halfway to the door. "That's dramatic," Dad muttered behind me. "She's fine." I turned, holding my daughter tight against my chest. "You don't get to decide that." No one stopped me. No one followed. No one offered to come. I caught a glimpse of Aunt Deborah, mouth open, hand to her chest. But she didn't speak. In the car, Grace calmed enough to doze off. I kept checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, needing to see her chest rise and fall. The hospital was 20 minutes away. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely keep them on the wheel. At the ER, I told them everything. "She was dropped," I said. "From adult height. She hit her head. I don't know what else." The nurses were kind. The doctor was quiet but thorough. They checked her vitals, ordered a scan, and assured me they'd monitor her closely for signs of concussion. Grace whimpered, but didn't cry much after the initial shock. They said kids were resilient. I didn't feel resilient. While we waited, I replayed the moment over and over. The look in my father's eyes. That moment of hesitation. He didn't reach for her when she fell. He didn't even move. And then the words he screamed before it happened. "You disgraced this family first." What did that even mean? I knew we weren't close. Not since high school. Not since I told him I wouldn't take over the accounting business he ran with iron fists and backroom deals. Not since I chose a different path: college, social work, single motherhood. That last one really twisted the knife. Grace wasn't born from scandal. Her father, Mark, left before she was born, yes. But I wasn't some teenager sneaking out the back window. I was a grown woman making the best of what I had. That's what Dad hated. I didn't come crawling back. The doctor returned an hour later. She has a mild bump and a bit of bruising, but no signs of internal trauma or fracture. You did the right thing bringing her in. Just keep a close eye. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. Then came the question I had been circling around since I walked out of that house. "Do you want to file a report?" the doctor asked. "This sounds like more than just a fall." I looked at Grace. Then I looked at my reflection in the hospital window. "Yes," I said. 2 officers came the next morning. I had barely slept. Grace was finally down after fussing most of the night, her small body draped across mine like a warm, breathing anchor. Officer Reynolds was soft-spoken, maybe in his 40s, with gray at his temples. His partner, Officer Novak, was younger, with impatient fingers that tapped on his notepad. They asked me to walk through everything. Again, what he said, how he held her, the look in his eyes, the fall, the bruises. Every word tasted like ash in my mouth, but I told the truth. "And this was at a family gathering?" Reynolds asked. "Yes, at my father's house." "Anyone else witness it?" "Everyone." They exchanged a look. "I don't know if anyone will say anything," I added quickly. They all froze. No one helped. They've always followed his lead. Reynolds scribbled something. "We'll need the names of everyone who was there." I hesitated. "Will you tell them I'm pressing charges?" Novak looked up. "Eventually." I nodded. I gave the list. After they left, I sat on the floor of the nursery with Grace asleep in my arms and stared at the window until the sun moved. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Aunt Deborah. I let it go to voicemail. Then my mother called. That one I answered. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. Age or regret, I couldn't tell. "Grace is okay," I said. "Bruised, scared, but okay." There was a pause. "You called the police." "I did." "Are you sure that's necessary?" I felt something cold uncoil in my spine. "Yes." Another pause. "He didn't mean to drop her." "You weren't there. I know your father. He's stubborn, loud, but he wouldn't hurt his own grandchild." "He hurt me," I snapped. "For years. And you watched." Silence again. Then, "This will destroy the family." "It's already destroyed," I said, and hung up. Later that evening, I opened my front door to find a manila envelope sitting on the welcome mat. No knock. No bell. Inside, a typed letter, no return address. But I knew the tone instantly. "You always wanted attention. Now you have it. Don't pretend this is about the baby. It's about revenge." No signature. No courage. I kept the envelope, for evidence. That night, I got an email from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Lacey. She'd moved to Colorado for school and stayed there, built a quiet life in Denver. I clicked her message with hesitation. "I saw what happened. I believe you. I've believed you for a long time. I didn't know how to help then, but if you want someone to testify—" "I will." I stared at the screen for minutes before I could even cry. Someone saw. Someone remembered. Someone was willing to speak. Detective McLaren called 3 days later. He was assigned to the case now. Calm, methodical, voice like gravel and late-night radio. "We've contacted several attendees," he said. "Most are hesitant. Some deny seeing the fall at all." I wasn't surprised. I grew up with silence sewn into the walls of our house. But one of your cousins, Lacey, provided a full statement. Says she saw him drop the baby. Says he didn't try to catch her. She told me, I said. I trust her. That helps. We've requested home surveillance footage from the neighbors across the street. Apparently, one of them has a ring camera that might have caught the driveway. If anything happened right before or after. Thank you, I whispered. My throat was tight again. McLaren paused. You okay, ma'am? Number, but I'm not giving up. After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen, staring at Grace's bottle drying on the rack. I thought about the last time my father ever held me. It was Christmas. I must have been 9. I got a B on a spelling test that week and cried over it. I remember him grabbing my wrist hard enough to leave a bruise and hissing that he wasn't raising weak stock. That night, he didn't even look at me during dinner. By the time I was 16, we barely spoke unless he was yelling. He called me melodramatic, selfish, too soft. When I chose social work over finance, he said I'd be cleaning up other people's messes like a damn maid. He told me I'd come crawling back, that I'd never survive without a man, that if I ever had a child out of wedlock, he'd disown me. I suppose this was his version of keeping that promise. 2 nights after McLaren's call, my doorbell rang. Susan stood outside, holding a pie. I just want to talk, she said quickly. Please, just 5 minutes. I didn't want to let her in, but I did. Maybe because I needed to hear someone, anyone, admit what happened. She sat on the edge of the couch, like she was afraid to disturb anything. I told him it wasn't okay, she began. He hasn't said much since. Not even sorry? She looked down at her hands. You know he doesn't do apologies. I laughed bitterly. Number he just writes anonymous letters and pretends to trip with infants in his arms. Her eyes flicked up. You got the letter? You didn't know? Number, but I can guess who. Probably your Uncle Darren. He says this family's been through enough and doesn't need more court drama. I leaned against the doorway. This isn't about drama. This is about Grace. Susan nodded slowly. I understand, but he's getting older. This could ruin what's left of his life. He tried to ruin mine, I said sharply. She stood, pie untouched. I know, and I don't blame you for doing what you're doing. But be ready, he's not going down quietly. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new email. Subject, you're a liar. No signature, just a block of text. You always needed someone to blame. You're trying to ruin a man's name over one slip. You weren't even supposed to bring that baby to the party. This is what happens when people like you act like they belong in the family. I forwarded it to McLaren and blocked the sender. But it lingered. I knew that tone. Cold, self-righteous. Just like my father. Or maybe like Uncle Darren. Or Aunt Joanna, who once told me I made things difficult for everyone after I reported a teacher for inappropriate behavior in high school. That teacher kept his job. I transferred. That's what it was always like in our family. Keep your head down, don't air dirty laundry, protect the men. I was breaking all the rules now. Lacey called that evening. I just wanted to check on you, she said. And Grace. We're okay, I replied. A little more tired every day, but okay. There was a pause. I got a call from Joanna. What did she say? She asked me to retract my statement. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. She said I was being dramatic, that I didn't really see what I thought I saw, that you were always jealous. I almost laughed. Jealous of what? She didn't say. I could hear the hesitation in Lacey's voice, the internal tug-of-war. I'm not backing down, she finally said. Tears sprang to my eyes. Thank you. That weekend, I had to cancel 2 shifts at work. My supervisor was kind, but concerned. Are you okay? She asked quietly, as I packed up my things for the week. I wanted to say yes, but the truth was, I wasn't sleeping. Every knock on the door made me jump. I checked on Grace twice an hour. I had recurring dreams of hands reaching toward her crib. Still, I smiled. Just dealing with something personal. She nodded. Let us know if you need anything. That night, I went through an old photo album. My mother had mailed it to me after I left home at 19. I hadn't opened it in years. I flipped through page after page of stiff smiles, forced Christmases, school plays where my father never clapped. And then I found it. A photo I'd forgotten existed. It was me, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the porch steps with a bruise on my cheek, smiling like I was told to. My mother was in the background. Her eyes weren't on me. She was looking away. I scanned it and emailed it to myself, not as evidence, just as a reminder. I would not let Grace grow up in silence. 2 days later, McLaren called again. We got the footage, he said. From the neighbor's camera? My heart skipped. It doesn't catch the fall, but it catches the aftermath. Your father walking outside, you screaming, the baby crying. And one more thing. He paused. What? He smiled, for a second, before anyone saw him. I couldn't breathe. We're moving forward. Charges are being filed. I'll keep you updated. The local news ran the headline 2 days later. Well-known accountant under investigation for alleged assault of infant granddaughter. They didn't use names, not yet. But anyone who lived in our town and saw the article knew. His face had been on billboards for years. Tax season royalty, church donor, Rotary Club sponsor, the upstanding citizen mask cracking in real time. My phone rang constantly that day. Some numbers I didn't recognize, some I did, and didn't answer. My mailbox filled with unread messages from family, all variations of the same theme. Take it back. Think of what you're doing. You're tearing us apart. But the truth was, we were never together. That night, I opened a message from a former high school teacher, Mrs. Conway. She had always been kind in the quiet way, the kind that saw bruises but never asked questions. Her email was short. I saw the story. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I didn't say something back then. I wept reading that. Because I remembered how I once came to school with a twisted wrist and said I fell off my bike. She had looked at me too long but said nothing. And now, 20 years later, she said something. The next morning, I got a certified letter from my father's lawyer. His name was Joel Keller. Sleek, predictable. The kind of man who wore expensive watches and smiled while he spoke over you. The letter was a cease and desist. He claimed my statements were defamatory and malicious, that I was intentionally trying to damage my father's professional and personal reputation. He demanded I issue a written apology and retract the report. I handed it to McLaren at our next meeting. He barely blinked. Standard scare tactic. They want to rattle you. It's working, I admitted. He nodded. That's also normal, but you need to stay focused. This will get harder before it gets easier. Grace sat in the stroller beside me, humming softly to herself, clutching her favorite stuffed lamb. I stared at her for a long time. I just want her to be safe. She is, because of you. Later that week, Lacey came by. She brought groceries, which I hadn't asked for, and sat at my kitchen table like it was the most normal thing in the world. They're mad at me, she said without preamble. I'm off the group texts. I didn't get an invite to Aunt Joanna's anniversary party. Darren called and said I'm choosing outsiders over blood. You don't have to keep doing this, I said quietly. She reached for my hand. Yes, I do. Because I saw what he did. Because I remember what he used to say about you when you weren't in the room. And because I watched all of them stand by, and I did nothing. I won't make that mistake again. I squeezed her hand, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel entirely alone in the room. That night, I took out my journal, the one I hadn't touched since before Grace was born, and wrote something simple. He didn't break me, and he won't break her. The day my father spoke publicly, the air felt too still, like the town was holding its breath. He gave an interview to the local paper, a carefully framed piece dressed in concern and dignity. The headline read, "Community leader denies abuse allegations, calls for family healing." He sat beside Susan in the photo, his hands clasped, eyes rimmed with artificial sorrow. He told the reporter he was heartbroken that his daughter had misinterpreted a tragic accident as malice. He spoke of sleepless nights, of being vilified by someone he loves. Then came the closer, "I hope she finds peace. And I hope someday my granddaughter will know I never meant to hurt her." The comment section exploded, a battlefield of sympathy and skepticism. Half the town seemed to rally around his image, claiming he'd done so much good, and this couldn't be true. The other half, especially younger voices, called it what it was: damage control. I stared at the screen, numb. He was rewriting the truth in real time, and people were buying it. Lacey was furious. He always does this, makes himself the victim, crocodile tears and handshakes. I nodded, but my stomach churned. What if the jury sees that version of him? "They won't," she said firmly, "because you're going to show them the real one." Later that week, I met with my attorney, Celia Ward. She was sharp, calm, and used to clients in distress. She laid everything out on the table: timelines, strategy, evidence lists, and potential witnesses. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "They're going to try to make you look unstable," she warned. "They'll say you're emotional, overreacting. They'll drag your personal life into it, Grace's father, your job, even your past." I swallowed hard. "I know." She paused, then leaned forward. "But we have a timeline, a witness, and video. And most importantly, we have your truth. If you're willing to fight, I'll fight with you." Something in me steadied. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Affidavits, character references, screenshots of messages, hospital records. I gathered everything, every thread of truth I could grip. I spent late nights writing down what happened in my own words. Not the police version, not the legal version, my version. Because if they were going to paint me as unhinged, I wanted the record of who I really was to live somewhere unfiltered. In between all this, I still had to be Grace's mother. She didn't understand what was happening, but she clung to me a little tighter, watched the door a little longer after someone knocked. Kids know more than we give them credit for. Then, on Friday morning, I got a text from a number I hadn't seen in years. "It's Matt. I heard what happened. Can I call?" Matthew, my younger cousin, the quiet one, the one who used to sit with me in the basement during holidays when the adults got loud upstairs. He was maybe 16 the last time I saw him. I stared at the message. Another crack in their fortress, another piece of the silence breaking. Matt called that same night. His voice had changed, deeper now, steadier, but there was still a quiet softness to it, like he hadn't completely unlearned silence. "I've been reading everything," he said. "I saw the article, and I knew I had to reach out." "I didn't expect you to," I admitted. He let out a breath. "I saw it happen. At the party. I was standing by the archway. He didn't trip." My heart slowed. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He adjusted his grip before it happened. "I saw the way he looked at you, like it was punishment." I was quiet, overwhelmed. After a moment, he added, "I wanted to say something that night." But Uncle Darren pulled me into the kitchen and told me to keep my mouth shut. That girls like you look for trouble. Tears pressed behind my eyes. "I'm sorry you were caught in that." "No," he said. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. But I'll talk to your lawyer. I'll say everything now." Later, I told Celia about the call. "He's willing to testify?" she asked. "Yes." "He saw it." "Then we've got more than just a case. We've got a pattern breaking." Court was scheduled in 2 weeks. It wasn't a criminal trial, not yet. but a formal hearing to determine if the charges would be elevated or dropped. My father's legal team was aggressive. They pushed to have the footage dismissed, called it inconclusive, claimed the smile was taken out of context. Celia filed motions in response. "They're trying to bury you under paperwork," she said, "but it's not going to work." I caught glimpses of my father in town once, at the bank, at the grocery store. He nodded at people like nothing had happened. A few smiled back. Others avoided eye contact. It was like the whole town couldn't decide if it believed me or just didn't want to. Meanwhile, Grace grew clingier. She cried when I left the room, even for a moment. Her pediatrician said it was normal, trauma responding to separation. "She's looking to you for safety," the doctor said. "Keep showing her she's got it." I did, every day, with every ounce of strength I had. The courthouse was small, almost unimpressive. Brick walls, scuffed tile floors. A receptionist who barely looked up as I walked through the metal detector. But to me, it felt like walking into the center of a storm. Celia met me at the entrance. "We don't have to win everything today," she reminded me. "We just have to show them there's something worth taking seriously." Matt arrived 10 minutes later. He was quiet, but not uncertain. His tie was crooked, and his hands shook slightly when he signed in as a witness. But when he looked at me, I saw the same fire I had felt, the one that only burns after years of being told to stay silent. The courtroom itself was nearly empty. A few townspeople sat in the back, a couple of reporters. My father's lawyer, Joel Keller, already seated and smirking slightly when we entered. And my father, he didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, hands folded, face blank. But not nervous, not ashamed, just rehearsed. The judge was a woman in her 60s with a sharp voice and sharper eyes. She called the session to order, laid out the purpose of the hearing, to determine whether sufficient cause exists to move this case to trial. Celia presented first. She kept her voice even, professional, but the weight in her words was unmistakable. She described the party, the fall, the bruise on Grace's head, the footage of my father smiling afterward. Then she introduced Matt. Matt's testimony was clear, though I saw his jaw twitch when Keller tried to interrupt. "I saw him drop her," Matt said. "It wasn't an accident. I've seen him angry before. This wasn't clumsy. This was cold." Keller dismissed it as emotionally charged hearsay. When it was time for my father's team, they went after everything. My past, my job, the fact that Grace's father wasn't involved. They painted me as unstable and vindictive. A woman overwhelmed by motherhood, grasping for someone to blame. But then they made a mistake. Keller suggested that I'd exaggerated Grace's injury for sympathy. Celia stood. "Let the court note that a licensed physician documented the bruising and signs of concussion risk. That's not exaggeration. That's medical fact." The judge nodded slightly. Keller sat down. When it was over, the judge said she'd issue a ruling within 3 days. Outside, the air was crisp. I expected to feel relief, but instead, I felt something else, like my body had been holding its breath for too long. Lacey met us at the steps. She hugged me without a word. Matt stood beside her, and for the first time in years, I looked at my fractured family and saw something worth keeping. Not the name, not the silence, but the courage to rebuild from the ashes of it all. The judge's ruling came on a rainy Tuesday. I was feeding Grace oatmeal when the phone rang. The drizzle outside tapped steadily against the windows, matching the rhythm of my heart. It was Celia. "She ruled in our favor," she said simply. "The case will proceed to trial." I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." The trial wouldn't happen for months, and I knew it would be grueling. But this was the doorway. The acknowledgement that what happened mattered. that we mattered. News spread quickly. By sunset, the town's Facebook groups were buzzing. Some called it a witch hunt. Others said they'd always known something wasn't right behind his perfect front. A few sent private messages thanking me for speaking when they hadn't. I walked to the park that afternoon with Grace bundled in my arms. The air was still damp, but the clouds were breaking. I sat on the bench near the swings, the same one my father used to sit on during my childhood. It felt different now. Not haunted, but reclaimed. Grace reached for a leaf on the ground, smiling. I looked at her tiny fingers and thought, you'll never have to wonder if your voice matters. Not in this house. Not with this mother.